Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Messenger. In the last part we reached the Sunken Shrine after using the magic seashell. We finally got in part 4. In case you're trying to figure out how the hell to get here, go watch part 4 and get the seashell there. And this time, it's time for us to go through the rest of this area. The Sunken Shrine is one of the many parts of the latter two-thirds of the game, the non-linear section, that I truthfully love without a doubt. Because it behaves closer to me dying a lot, apparently, to the linear section of the game, in that there's a clear goal for us to get to. We just need to find out how to get to it. The dungeons in Shantae and the Pirate's Curse are another good comparison. And because of that, I think when the game still does these in this latter two-thirds, and there's a couple times it does, they're the best parts of the latter part of the game. Also backtracking a little bit here, because now we can actually head up this waterfall here to find ourselves an item. Not anything important, I think it's just a giant time shard, but hey, the time shards are important. There's 3 upgrades I still haven't gotten. And one of them only costs, I think, 450 time shards, or is it 350? One of the two. The other 2 cost 1 and 2,000 respectively, so I'm gonna need to really save up for those, and getting as many time shards as I can is only gonna help with that. Now, the Sunken Shrine, as its name would suggest and the background suggests, is the water area for the game. We had water often in most of the prior levels, but this is the only one I would call outright a water stage. We're going to be dealing with a lot of water physics, moving back and forth between the timelines, as there are times in the present where there is water, where there is not in the future, and vice versa. Very often the intention is that the water drains out and goes somewhere else, or slowly fills up a pool as time progresses. Now, while we're on this path, I mentioned back in, I think it was part 10, the Key of Adventure, the one on the far left of the music notes thing in the Tower of Time. I keep doing that. And how we were originally supposed to grab that in Bamboo Creek in the development cycle. But the interesting thing is, they actually do have a rough description for what the text would have said when we collected that. It would have said something along the lines of, many of the messengers who reached Bamboo Creek felt it a bit more lighthearted, and thus it made the impacts of the journey dawn upon them, realizing they were committed to the journey with no turning back. That repeated feeling among so many adventurers eventually materialized into the key. That's paraphrased, by the way, off of the Messenger Wiki, because a lot of this stuff, a lot of the development information behind the scenes stuff is known about the game, because the developers have been very open about it through the Discord, Q&As, and just outright transparency from the team about what this could mean, so on and so forth. Like, I know the writer and director, who was the same person, by the way, has directly stated what the origins of the music notes are, and what their purpose is. Although, before I go into that topic, fun little fact as well. The developers of the game published a Mario Maker 2 level titled The Key of Adventure, which is a sort of what-if scenario. If Mario was an early adventure, you would go through an adaptation of Bamboo Creek to get it. And I haven't seen the level, but I feel like if they could somehow manage to make the messenger mechanics work in that, in terms of like how they could do something along the lines of cloud stepping, that could be cool. Oh, what's this? We got the Lightfoot Tabi. You can now run on liquid surfaces by holding right trigger. Just make sure you keep moving. Indeed, now we can Jesus over water. However, the caveat to this is you need to be holding the button no matter what, and you can't stand on water, you can only run or walk over it. If you let go of the D-pad at any point, you will fall into the water and take damage to whatever's beneath it, usually spikes. You also can't reverse direction while standing on the water, because it counts as you stopping moving at first. So what you need to do if you want to change direction on the water is do a minor leap up. Also, you may have seen a jump cut there. That one was for a very specific purpose. My frames were dropping, and the game didn't want me to play it for about 30 minutes. This was, I believe I mentioned this when we first did the Metroidvania stuff. The Messenger was a bit weird with recording in that once I hit the non-linear portion of the game, I started doing longer recording sessions since it wasn't just a level, it was me going for about a half hour at a time. Every 35 minutes plus of recording to an hour of pure recording footage, the game's frame rate would drop to about 2/3 while it was recording. Not while the recorder wasn't going, just when I was recording. And I'm assuming it has to do with like some CPU usage stuff and such, but it's one of the few games that's ever outright done that to me. I've had games run at consistently non-60 frame rates, either because the game itself doesn't run that high or the recorder itself doesn't pick up too well with it. Guacamelee, one in particular, if I recall correctly, constantly ran with the recorder at like 40 frames a second. It's one of the few times I'm actually relatively thankful that my current editing software can only render out 30 a second. Which I am working on getting to one that has a 60 frame a second thing, don't you worry, because I do want to display games in their native frame rate. I just need to get the money. And I'm working on that. I am very much working on that. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the every game should run at 60 thing. I think ultimately it depends on the intentions of the developer and such. Having 60 is nice, but it's not needed. My only minimum is that I would like most games to play at least 30 because that's a solid frame rate that you can read motion to and accepts inputs at enough regular intervals that it's smooth. The lowest I'm willing to go frame rate wise is 20, barring slowdown. Slowdown going lower than that, sure, why not? Like, when I eventually get to the Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask LPs, which, as that update video said about New Year's time, said is sooner than you'd think. Those run at 20, because I'm going to be playing the N64 version. So, I'm going to be okay with that running at 20, plus that'll actually be one of the few games I've played in the past bit that will be displayed at its proper frame rate in the video, which is going to be weird. But, again, I think it ultimately depends on the intention of the developer. As long as the frame rate is consistent, ultimately, is my biggest thing. If it's 30, make it sure it stays around 30 constantly. If it's 40, make it 40 consistently, so on and so forth. It's like, if I recall correctly, doesn't Batman Arkham City run at consistently 63 at max settings, which is just kind of odd? With the Lightfoot Tabi, though, we are now able to access the two major portions of the Sunken Shrine. Below the door to the left and right are two fall-through platforms, as I showed off earlier, that lead to two areas you can only access once you've gotten the Tabi. And this will allow you to do the main puzzles within each of the areas. Obviously, I've completely almost ignored the first pathway, but that's because I got engrossed in a topic. I mean, come on. I mean, that happens to all of us. I mean, come on. And actually, there's our goal right there, but I'm backtracking really quick because I want to come over here and get the thing over here. This isn't a power seal. I already remember this one being a giant time shard just when I was playing it. Though this is one I gave me a lot more trouble than I'd like to admit my first playthrough, just because I didn't think to just reverse direction to midair around the spikes. Spike wheels? Chainsaws? Buzzsaws? I think buzzsaws is technically what they are, actually. Why am I calling them spike wheels? How to tell someone plays too much Mega Man. We got the Sun Crest. Maybe it has something to do with the locked door with the two sockets in the Sunken Shrine. Maybe so. And with that, we loop back around to the central area. Fun fact, I forget if it was just through smartly placing which dimension which era you were in, and coming back that way, or through some out-of-bounds trickery, but there actually was a way to see the main room in the Sunken Shrine in the 8-bit era. But the problem is, if you tried to leave with that, through that method, you would ultimately crash the game when you tried to get back to the Howling Grotto. Which, obviously, that's a bit of a problem, so they patched that out, I think it was like the 1.04, or 1.0.4 release. Because I think the game still gets some stability updates every now and then. The biggest updates to the game are to the ARG, because that is still ongoing. In fact, they had some lore stuff revealed, I think, as recently as December of 2019-ish. Because I know they were doing a stream relevant to, like, merch and stuff. Like a Sabo... I forget what it was called. The community for this is very active, is the way to put it. And I'm looking forward to see if they can continue that kind of stuff in their new game. Which, speaking of the new game, I think this area is going to play a little bit into that, but I'll talk more about that at the end of the area. I do think the left half of the Sunken Shrine is easier than the right half, so I recommend taking that order around things. But ultimately, you can die underwater. Weird little thing, by the way, about dying underwater. When you die, obviously, like the death jingle plays from Corbel. But if you die underwater, it plays, but it's not muffled by the water, which feels off to me. I understand why it's not, but it's like, it seems wrong. Which makes me think they also just remove all hitboxes and considerations of where you are when you die, just so they can play the animation correctly. And I think that's the final power seal for this area. Thankfully, they are usually generous enough when it comes to returning to these kind of areas for power seals, because there's usually a quick way to do so. Be it the Tower of Time through the Tower of Time HQ, you can just talk to the Artificer and he'll be like, hey, you can do it! There's this place which directly just has a portal. The top of Glacial Peak you can go back to simply just by going through the Warp Room. Same with near the start of the Autumn Hills. They're very kind about the placement of those. It's just navigating between two of them, or in the areas between, where things can get a bit iffy. Also, those windows look very phallic. I don't think I ever noticed that before. It is interesting just how much you can notice in the background of something when you're not actively playing it. Like, I think that's how I first noticed in Castlevania Symphony of the Night I can't remember the name of the eye enemy. The annoying eye enemies from Rondo of Blood. How you can see one in the background of that long hallway on the way to the castle wall area early on in Symphony of the Night. Now we have an option here. We can just head up for progress, or we can head back down here, because I did believe there's another pathway for us, though I think this doesn't lead to a power seal. If I'm recalling, this is just another big time shard, yeah. Still, I'll take as many of these as I can get. The weird thing about the Sunken Shrine is, difficulty-wise, it feels about on par with, not the Howling Grotto, but maybe Quillshroom Marsh. There's deadly traps, don't get me wrong, but thanks to generous checkpoint placement and how late in the game you are, you have enough health and such that's not big of a threat. And we got the Moon Crest. Maybe it has something to do with the locked door with the 2 sockets in the Sunken Shrine. You don't say. And thankfully we're about to be right there. What's helping that is that there isn't a boss fight for this area, even. The boss fight itself, I guess, is supposed to be the challenges of the area. With that, let's see what's behind door number 1 of 1. Also, pay attention to the background in the next room. Welcome, adventurer. You must be wary. Allow the sanctity of this place to mend your wounds and invigorate your spirit. We are proud of all you could achieve on your own. What is this place? This shrine and its history matter little now. A tragic fate has befallen this world indeed. Eons ago, we were its guardians. Are you gods? Some would say that. As the roots of wisdom grew more distant with each passing generation, humans took the security for granted and set faith aside. Devoid of worshippers, our power slowly faded. Your world was a vibrant sight before the flood. Then, as fate would have it, a powerful curse befell its only remaining piece of land. Guardians? How long ago was this? The implications of our story would make little sense to denizens of a fallen world. A fallen world? Your world, its connection to the stars, has long been severed. Increasingly helpless in the face of impending doom, we crystallized the last of our energy so that when the time came, it could support humanity's final hope. That final hope, messenger, is you. As we have since the day you were born, we will be watching over you. Now receive our final gift to the world. And we got the Key of Love, left by gods long forgotten to be found at the time of its greatest need. It is one of the notes needed to create a melody that'll break the curse. I believe this is a relatively common theory, but I believe those two are either going to be the main characters of, or play into the new game by the Sabotage Studio team, Sea of Stars. Not only from the name, but because of the color schemes. The two main characters we've seen for the new game are a woman with blue hair and a man with a red sword. And given the whole Sea of Stars thing, they fit the moon and sun aesthetic, so I'm thinking those two are going to play into that. With that, we now have half of the music notes we need to grab, so we can now go after our fourth one, and to do that, I want to head to the Searing Crags. From there, now that we have the Lightfoot Tabi, we can now access something we couldn't before. And this is something that took me longer to find than I'd like to admit, because you see, remember, the Lightfoot Tabi said, liquids, not just water. Lava counts. So let me guess, your name's Pyro?
That's me.
How did you get so close to the Underworld if you can't stand fire?
Oh, the irony, right?
To be honest, I don't remember, but I do have to get back to my workstation.
Thanks for snapping me out of it.
And finally, we have our second Phobican. It's only been, what? 9 parts? 10? Since we got Necro. But this is how you access the Underworld during the non-linear section of the game, because you can no longer go back to the Cloud Ruins and fall down that pit. It's not there anymore. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 12, we're heading back to hell, and then somewhere else after that. See you guys then.